Hello friends again, welcome back to Shadows of Revenge. First at all, tell me, where are you from the world watching my video? This is a true story, so watch till end. My name is Tom Halverson. The night my wife told me she was taking my stepdaughter to spend Christmas with her ex-husband, the house didn't explode. There was no dramatic argument at first, no shattered glass, no words hurled like weapons. What broke that night broke quietly, the way old bones fracture under weight they've been carrying for too long. It began with a door. She slammed it hard enough that the kitchen windows rattled in their frames, a sharp, ugly sound that cut through the hum of the furnace. I remember thinking, strangely, how thin the glass looked in that moment, how easily it might crack. Then she turned on me, her finger extended, nail painted a bright, polished red that looked almost violent against the dull beige walls. "Lily needs her real father," she said. Her voice was steady, rehearsed, like she'd practiced the sentence in her car before coming inside. "If you don't like it, divorce me." She didn't shout. She didn't waver. She said it the way someone reads a verdict. I didn't argue. That's the part people never understand when I tell this story. They expect yelling, pleading, some last-ditch stand for dignity. But I didn't have anything left in me that night. I wiped the sawdust from my hands, fine, pale grit clinging to my skin from the dollhouse I'd been repairing downstairs, and walked to the kitchen table. My old laptop was still there, lid slightly warped, one corner cracked. I opened it, stared at the inbox I'd been avoiding for years, and finally accepted the job transfer to Japan. I'd turned it down 3 times before. For her. For us. For the idea that staying meant loyalty. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet click of acceptance was the sound of my life splitting in two. A week later, she was screaming on my front porch, pounding on the door like she still owned the place. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It didn't start with screaming. It never does. It started on a gray Tuesday in Cedar Falls, Iowa. One of those days where the sky hangs low and colorless, and the cold feels personal. The river had already been salted into submission, the roads crusted white, and everyone walked hunched forward, shoulders raised, just trying to get through another December workday. I put in a full shift at the paper mill, stayed late to quiet a motor that wouldn't stop humming, the kind of mechanical whine that crawls into your skull if you let it go too long. By the time I clocked out, my back ached and my hands smelled like oil and pulp. I stopped by the grocery store on the way home, grabbed milk and a rotisserie chicken, the warm plastic container fogging slightly in the cold air. When I opened the front door, the smell hit me first, cinnamon and pine, artificial but comforting. The little fake Christmas tree in the corner was already lit, colored lights blinking softly in the front window. That was Lily's doing. She was 10 years old and loved Christmas like it was a full-time job. She came sliding into the hallway in socked feet, skidding a little on the hardwood. "Daddy Tom," she said, breathless, "did you fix the dollhouse roof?" I smiled despite everything and held it up. The small wooden dollhouse had once been a wreck, a yard sale casualty Marcy brought home on a whim. I'd spent 3 evenings in the basement sanding splintered edges, regluing warped seams, steadying it piece by piece after work. "Give it a try," I said. Lily pressed both hands down on the pink roof. It didn't budge. "I told Mom you could fix it," she said, grinning. "You always fix everything." I wish that had been true. In the kitchen, Marcy stood at the stove with her back to me, stirring a pot of sauce. Her shoulders were tense, lifted high. I'd learned over the years that you could tell her mood just by where her shoulders sat. "Hey," I said, setting the milk in the fridge. "We got the Christmas bonus today. It's not huge, but it'll cover the bike and then some." She didn't turn around. "We need to talk," she said. For words. For words that have never meant anything good in the history of human speech. "Okay," I said carefully. "About what?" She turned off the burner, set the spoon down with a clink that sounded too loud in the quiet kitchen, and finally faced me. She was wearing a nice blouse, lipstick still perfect from work. It struck me then, uncomfortably, that she dressed more carefully for strangers than she did for evenings at home. "I talked to Rick," she said, "her ex-husband, the man who missed birthdays and parent-teacher conferences, but always had a story ready. Always a reason. Always an excuse." "About what?" I asked, though my stomach had already begun to tighten. "About Christmas," she said, as if the answer should have been obvious. "He invited us to the cabin this year. He wants to make up for lost time with Lily." She paused, watching my face. "She needs her real father in her life." "Marcy," I said. We already have plans. Church service, dinner at St. Luke's, your parents. She cut me off with a flick of her hand. We have habits, she said, not plans. You and your church hall potlucks and folding chairs. Her lip curled slightly. Lily deserves a real Christmas. A big cabin. A real tree. And her real dad. She hit that word like a hammer. I stood there, absorbing it, feeling something hollow open up inside my chest. I thought I was part of that. I said quietly, I'm the one here. I'm the one reading to her, taking her to the dentist, showing up at school. Her mouth twisted. You're the stepfather, she said flatly. Don't make this about you. You knew what you were signing up for. Rick is her actual father. She needs that bond. Maybe if you weren't so simple about everything, you'd understand. Something small and quiet broke then. Not a dramatic snap. More like an old board finally giving way under weight it had carried for years. And where do I fit in? I asked. She shrugged. Already done with the conversation. You don't. Not this time. We're going to the cabin for a week. We leave on the 23rd. If you can't handle that, you can file for divorce. Or I will. She said it like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed all afternoon. From the living room, Lily's voice floated in. Mom, are we watching the Christmas movie tonight? Marcy didn't answer. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, waiting for a reaction. I'd given her plenty over the years, pleading, arguing, explaining myself like a teenager caught breaking curfew. This time, I didn't. I thought about the email sitting flagged in my inbox. Final offer. Plant maintenance supervisor. Japan. I thought about my father, who'd worked 35 years at the same factory, who used to tell me, don't let anybody treat you like you're lucky just to be standing in the room. I see, I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. When did you tell Lily? I asked. Yesterday, she said. She's excited. Rick's picking us up. Of course he was. Okay, I said. I'll stay out of your way. She blinked. That's it, she demanded. You're not going to yell? Call me selfish? Threaten to call a lawyer? I shook my head. No, not tonight. She scoffed, muttering something about me being spineless, and turned back to the stove. I walked past the smell of sauce, past the stack of unopened mail, and into the living room. Lily had lined up the tiny wooden family in front of the dollhouse. The little dad figure stood closest to the door. Movie time, I asked. She beamed. Can we do the black and white one with the angel again? It's a Wonderful Life, I said. Yeah, we can. She curled up under my arm, blanket pulled to her chin, head resting against my shoulder. On the screen, George Bailey's life unfolded. Every sacrifice, every unnoticed kindness. I watched, but my mind was elsewhere, counting the times I turned down that job. The nights I'd fixed leaky pipes, broken cabinets, loose railings, thinking we were building something solid. Halfway through, Lily fell asleep. I carried her to bed, tucked the quilt under her chin, and stood there listening to her breathe. Downstairs, the house felt different. Empty, somehow, even with Marcy still there and the television murmuring to itself. I sat at the kitchen table, pulled my laptop closer, and opened the email. Hi, Ken, I typed. If the position is still available, I'd like to accept. The cursor blinked. I read it twice. Heard my father's voice again. Then I hit send. The soft whoosh of the email leaving sounded louder than it should have in that small kitchen. I didn't pack that night. I didn't leave a note. I just sat there, listening to the furnace kick on, the ice maker clunk to life, ordinary sounds of a house that suddenly wasn't really mine. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet choice had already set something irreversible in motion. If a man is told he isn't real long enough, at what point does he start believing it himself? When the plane lifted off the runway, I didn't feel free. I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow. The lights of the Midwest blurred beneath the wing, neat little grids dissolving into darkness. And I sat there with my hands folded in my lap like I was waiting for bad news instead of running toward a new job on the other side of the world. I kept expecting my phone to buzz. A message from Marcy, angry or smug. A message from Lily, confused, scared, asking why I wasn't home. Nothing came. When the plane finally touched down, it wasn't even in Japan yet. Canada first. A layover, a limbo. The air inside the terminal smelled like coffee and disinfectant, and the crowd moved with purpose around me while I stood still, feeling like I'd stepped out of my own life and into someone else's. That was when the quiet hit. Not peace. Not relief. Just quiet. The kind that settles after a storm when the air still smells like rain, and you don't know yet whether the damage is finished. Tokyo was bright even at night. Neon signs stacked on top of one another, trains sliding past like veins of light, streets alive with motion. None of it belonged to me. I followed the instructions the company had sent, collected my key, and stepped into a modest apartment arranged with clinical efficiency. A narrow bed, a tiny kitchen, a window that looked down onto a street where businessmen hurried past with black umbrellas, even when it wasn't raining. The next morning, Kenji met me outside the building. He was tall, soft-spoken, polite in a way that didn't feel forced. He bowed slightly when he introduced me to the crew at the plant, and they bowed back, a simple exchange that carried more respect than I'd felt in years. People here work hard, Kenji said as we put on our safety gear. But we take care of each other. You'll fit in. I nodded, but the truth was I didn't feel like I fit anywhere. I moved through my days like a ghost, learning procedures, memorizing names, smiling when expected. And every spare second, my hand drifted toward my phone. No messages. Marcy's silence didn't surprise me. She could go weeks pretending I didn't exist when it suited her. But Lily always found a way to reach me. A drawing. A question. A badly spelled text filled with too many exclamation points. On the third night, I sent the first message. Hey kiddo, hope you're having fun. I'm in Japan now. Miss you. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. No reply. The next day, after my shift, I tried again. Sent you a little gift. Might take a week to get there. Love you. Still nothing. A few nights later, walking home under a sky threaded with wires and blinking lights, I ducked into a convenience store. It smelled like hot oil and sweetbread. On a small rack near the counter were wooden charms, simple things tourists bought for luck or protection. One caught my eye, a little fox carved smooth, its shape worn soft by other hands. I bought it without thinking. Back in my apartment, I wrapped it carefully, wrote Lily's name in careful block letters, and mailed it back to Iowa. It cost more than I expected. I didn't care. On the walk home, I passed a family. A father, a mother, a daughter no older than Lily. The girl held both their hands, jumping over every crack in the sidewalk, laughing each time she cleared one. I stopped walking and watched them disappear around the corner. That was when the guilt finally landed. Heavy, crushing, the kind that presses on your chest until breathing feels like work. Had I abandoned her? Had I really been any better than Rick, disappearing when things got complicated? I told myself I needed space, perspective, time. But guilt has a way of sneaking in like winter drafts through old windows. You don't notice it at first, then suddenly you can't get warm. Every night, I checked my email. Every night, it was empty. One Saturday, a younger coworker named Daichi asked me to join him for ramen. We sat in a narrow shop, steam fogging the windows, bowls heavy with broth between us. He noticed me checking my phone again and again. Waiting for someone, he asked gently. My daughter, I said, then corrected myself. My stepdaughter. He nodded slowly. Complicated. You could say that. He studied me with the same quiet patience I'd seen at the plant. Family matters are never simple, he said. But truth always shows itself. I didn't know then how right he was. The twist came on a Tuesday. I was sitting on my apartment balcony, eating vending machine soba that tasted faintly of salt and plastic, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. I rarely opened Facebook, but that night, for reasons I still can't explain, I did. At the top of the feed was a photo posted by a neighbor back in Iowa. Marcy and Lily stood in front of a large snow-covered cabin. She wore a red sweater I recognized instantly. I'd bought it for her last Christmas. And beside them was Rick. He was wearing my sweater, the old green one with the stitched pine tree Lily loved because she said it looked happy. They stood close together, arms angled just right, smiling like a family that had always belonged that way. The caption read, Family Christmas at the cabin, followed by 2 heart emojis. My food went cold in my hands. Something sharp cut through me. Not just jealousy, not just betrayal. It was the realization that she had looked me in the eye, told me Lily needed her real father, and then stepped neatly into the life she'd always wanted, leaving me out of the frame entirely. I zoomed in on the picture. That's when the second punch landed. Lily wasn't smiling. Not really. Her lips were turned up, but her eyes weren't crinkled the way they always were when she laughed. She looked uncertain, lost, like a child standing still for a picture she didn't want to take. Something inside me broke and fixed itself at the same time. I closed the app and rubbed my face with both hands. The guilt that had been eating me alive shifted into something colder, clearer, resolve. 2 days later, I was in the break room when Di walked in holding his phone, his expression cautious. "Tom," he said, "is your last name Halverson?" "Yes," I said slowly. He turned the screen toward me. A legal notice posted on a public county website. Divorce filing. Marcy Halverson. Reason, abandonment. Filed 3 days after I left for Japan. My chest felt hollow. "She's saying you left with no intention to return," Di said quietly. "That the house and all assets should go to her. She knew," I whispered. "She watched me accept the job. She told me to leave." He nodded. Sometimes people choose lies when truth is inconvenient. I sank into the chair. She wasn't just happy without me. She was trying to erase me. That night, my phone buzzed. A delivery notification. The charm I'd mailed to Lily had arrived 2 days earlier. No response. Of course not. I imagined it intercepted, tossed aside, another quiet lie added to the pile. And for the first time since this began, I felt anger. Not hot, not loud, cold, deliberate. I looked out over the narrow street below as snow began to fall, soft and silent, settling over Tokyo like a blanket. Inside me, something hardened into certainty. I wasn't going back to Iowa to save a marriage. I was going back to save a little girl who deserved the truth, and to make sure the person lying to her finally faced it. I booked my return flight that night. When the plane touched down in Iowa, the cold bit my face like a reprimand. Waterloo Regional was quiet, families dragging luggage through slush, boots crunching over dirty snow. No one was there to greet me. That was fine. I booked a small room at the VFW post on Franklin Street. It wasn't fancy, just a bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the parking lot, but it felt solid, honest, like the kind of place you stay when you've got work to do. I set my bag down and stood there breathing in the smell of old wood and burnt coffee. A veteran with a buzz cut nodded at me in the hallway. "Haven't seen you in a while, Tom," he said. "Getting there," I replied. That afternoon, I drove past my old house. The wreath still hung crooked on the door. The little artificial tree blinked in the window. For a moment, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. I didn't stop. I needed information before confrontation. Because when lies spread quietly, the truth has to walk in carrying proof. And I was done being silent. If someone can convince the world you vanished, how do you prove you never left? The truth doesn't announce itself. It waits. It gathers quietly in bank statements, overheard conversations, court filings most people never expect to see their own names printed on. By the time it finally steps forward, it isn't loud, it's heavy. My first stop wasn't my house. It wasn't the school. It wasn't Marcy. It was the credit union. Blackhawk Credit Union sat just off the main road, its brick exterior dusted with old snow that had hardened into gray patches. I'd walked through those doors for years, deposited paychecks, signed loan paperwork, joked about interest rates like any other small-town regular. Denise was at the counter when I walked in. She looked up and froze. "Tom," she said, blinking. "I thought you moved overseas." "Not permanently," I said. "I just need some information." Her expression shifted, relief mixed with something closer to concern. She leaned forward and lowered her voice. "Your wife's been in here," she said. "More than once." I already knew what was coming, but it still landed hard. "She tried to pull everything from your joint account," Denise continued. "Got real upset when we told her she needed your signature. Asked to speak to the manager. Then the board. We had to ask her to leave." "Did she say why?" I asked. Denise sighed. "She said you abandoned the family. Claimed she needed emergency funds." I nodded slowly. "That's not how this works," I said. She slid a printout across the counter. 3 months of account activity. My transactions on one side. Marcy's attempted withdrawals on the other. "Take care of yourself, Tom," she said quietly. "You look tired." "I'm working on it." From there, I went to Hy-Vee. I wasn't hungry. I needed to listen. I pushed a cart through the produce aisle slowly, pretending to inspect apples while voices drifted through the air. He ran off to Japan with somebody. Poor Marcy, stuck with the kid and all those bills. Just like her first husband. She sure knows how to pick them. I rounded a corner and nearly collided with Sandy, one of the cashiers who'd rung me up 1,000 times over the years. Her eyes widened. "Lord, Tom," she said. So she was lying. I stopped the cart. "What did she say?" I asked. Sandy crossed her arms. "That you skipped town with a woman half your age. Blew your bonus on yourself. Left her stranded." I exhaled slowly. "None of that's true." "I figured," she said. "You always struck me as steady." "She's been in here 3 times this week complaining about everything." I finally stopped asking how she was. I nodded. "Thanks, Sandy. Be careful," she added. "She's going to lose it when she finds out you're back." That night, I spread everything out on the bed at the VFW. Bank records, screenshots, printed emails, the divorce filing, abandonment stamped across it like a brand. But the thing that hurt the most wasn't legal. It was a drawing. Lily had given it to me before they left. The two of us holding hands next to a Christmas tree. I kept it folded carefully in my bag. I stared at it for a long time. Did she think I left because of her? Did she think I didn't want to be her dad anymore? That thought nearly took the air out of my lungs. The next morning, I called the school. The receptionist transferred me to the counselor, Mrs. Callahan. "Tom," she said, relief flooding her voice. "I'm so glad you called. You've talked to Lily?" I asked. "Yes." "She's confused." That word again. "She asked where you went." Mrs. Callahan continued. "I told her sometimes grown-ups have complicated things to work through. That you love her." My hand tightened around the phone. "She cried." The counselor said gently. "She said her mom told her you chose Japan over her." Something hot rose into my throat. "She said that?" I asked. "Yes," Mrs. Callahan replied. "I'm so sorry." When the call ended, I sat there staring at the wall. That was the moment the doubt vanished. I hadn't failed Lily. Marcy had lied to her, and I wasn't going to let that stand. I spent the next 2 days building my case. Eric Jensen, my old high school friend, met me in his small office behind the Casey's gas station. He flipped through my binder, page by page, his expression growing darker with each one. "She really stepped in it," he said finally. "Abandonment filing 3 days after you left. Asset liquidation attempts. Blocking contact with the child. So what do I do?" I asked. "You respond," he said, "and you show up." He leaned back in his chair. "Her lawyer thinks you're still overseas," he added. "That's your advantage. Will it protect Lily?" He nodded. "Absolutely." Staying calm was the hardest part. The morning of the hearing, snow fell in heavy, slow flakes. The courthouse loomed across the river, gray and unmoving. I walked up the steps, carrying my binder like it weighed twice as much as it should. Inside, the radiators hissed. People murmured on wooden benches, dealing with their own small disasters. Marcy wasn't there yet. Then the doors opened. She walked in wearing a long red wool coat with a fur-lined collar. Her hair was curled, makeup perfect, confidence radiating off her like heat. Until she saw me. She froze. Just for a second. Shock, irritation, panic. Then the mask snapped back into place. "Well," she said loudly. "Look who finally decided to show up." I didn't respond. The judge entered, a stern woman with steel gray hair. "Case number 24 to 1781, she said. "Halverson versus Halverson." Her eyes lifted. "Mr. Halverson, I wasn't expecting you." Eric stood. "My client did not abandon his family, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "Proceed." I stood. "I left the country because my wife told me she and Lily were spending Christmas with her ex-husband," I said. "She told me Lily needed her real father, and that if I didn't like it, I could file for divorce." A murmur moved through the room. I laid out everything. The job offer, the messages, the blocked contact, the financial attempts. Marcy interrupted. "He's lying." The judge raised a hand. "Mrs. Halverson, you'll wait." Then Sandy stood up from the back. The room went silent. The truth didn't shout. It just stood there. When the ruling came down, Marcy's face went from red to white. "Sometimes real fathers are the ones who stay," the judge said. The gavel struck. And then, "Daddy Tom." I turned. Lily stood in the doorway. She ran to me, arms tight around my waist. "I knew you didn't leave me," she whispered. In that moment, everything changed, because the truth had finally reached the person who mattered most. And once it does, there's no undoing it. The courtroom emptied in pieces. Benches scraped. Paper shuffled. Voices dropped into murmurs and then dissolved into the echoing hallway beyond the doors. People carry their own stories out with them. Traffic tickets, custody arguments, small victories, quiet defeats. All of it blurred together. I didn't move. Lily stayed, wrapped around me like she was anchoring herself to something solid, her face pressed into my coat, her small hands gripping fabric like it might disappear if she let go. I rested my chin lightly against the top of her head, breathing her in, shampoo, winter air, something unmistakably hers. For so long, I've been bracing for loss that I hadn't prepared myself for this. For being chosen. I knew you didn't leave me, she whispered again, her voice small but certain now. I closed my eyes. No, I said softly. I didn't. The counselor stood nearby, giving us space, watching with a quiet kind of relief. The judge had already moved on to the next case. The system didn't linger. It rarely does. But for me, time had slowed to something almost fragile. A week later, the house felt different. Not empty. Peaceful. Marcy's absence wasn't loud. It didn't echo. It felt like the removal of constant tension, like a wire finally cut after years of humming too close to your skin. Under the court's temporary order, I moved back in while the guardian completed her evaluation. Lily stayed with me every other night at first. Even when she wasn't there, the house felt fuller than it ever had before. She had a way of doing that. She hummed when she brushed her hair, tapped her fingers against the table when she did homework, whispered to the wooden dollhouse I'd fixed, moving the tiny figures from room to room like she was rearranging a world that finally made sense. The first night she stayed over, she climbed into my bed around 2 in the morning without saying a word, just curled into my side, her arm draped across my chest like she was afraid I might fade out of existence if she let go. I'm still here, I whispered into the dark. She nodded once and didn't loosen her grip. The guardian arrived on Thursday. Donna, navy coat, clipboard tucked under her arm. Professional, observant, calm. She walked through the house slowly, asking questions, making notes. Where does Lily keep her school projects? Hall closet, I said. Third shelf. Who helps her with homework? I do. Sometimes Mrs. Callahan checks in too. She paused, pen hovering. When she calls you Dad, how long has that been? Since she was 3. Donna looked up at me then, really looked. That matters, she said. More than you think. Dinner that night was simple. Grilled cheese. Tomato soup. Lily dipped the corners of her sandwich into the soup and declared it fancy. She told me about school. About her friend Clara's new puppy. About a drawing she was working on. I could draw anything I want for the guardian, she said proudly. So I'm drawing you and me at the Christmas festival. The one with the popcorn machine and the ice sculptures. I swallowed hard. That sounds perfect, I said. She smiled wide, the gap from her missing front tooth shining like proof that time had kept moving, even when I felt stuck. That was the best night, she said. And it was. Until the following Monday. Snow had fallen overnight, thick enough to hide the cracks in the driveway. I just poured myself a cup of coffee when I heard a car door slam hard enough to rattle the window. Then another. Then fast footsteps crunching through snow. Bang, bang, bang. Open this door right now. Marcy's voice sliced through the quiet like a blade. I set my mug down carefully. When I opened the door, cold air rushed in along with her fury. Her hair was wild, coat unbuttoned, boots caked with snow. Her eyes were wide, frantic, unsteady. You think you won? She screamed. You think this is over? You don't have any legal right to be here, I said calmly. She stepped forward until her boots hit the threshold. That judge humiliated me, she hissed. You ruined my life. I didn't ruin anything, I said. I told the truth. Her hands curled into fists. You stole my daughter. She isn't something to steal, I replied. And you know that. For a moment, something flickered across her face, fear maybe, recognition. Then it vanished. You think you're a hero, she spat. You're nothing. Behind her, a truck idled in the driveway. Rick's truck. He sat in the driver's seat, arms folded, staring straight ahead. He didn't get out, didn't wave, didn't even look at her. When she noticed him, her voice shifted. You can leave now, she snapped. He didn't respond. He put the truck in reverse and drove away without a word. Marcy watched him go, stunned. Then she turned back to me, eyes blazing. He's a coward, she said. A pathetic coward. For your sake, I said quietly, you should go. She screamed then, raw, broken, collapsing, and stomped back into the snow. She slipped once, caught herself, and kept going, muttering curses as she disappeared down the sidewalk. I closed the door. 2 hours later, an email arrived. From Rick. He apologized, admitted he hadn't known about the lies, about the abandonment filing, about Lily being used as leverage. "You're the only real father she's ever had," he wrote. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't friendship. It was truth. That evening, Lily climbed onto the couch with something hidden behind her back. "I made you something," she said. She placed a small wooden figure in my hand, the little dad from the dollhouse. She'd painted the shirt brown like my jacket, flecks of gray in the hair. On the base, in careful, uneven letters, she'd written Dad. "It looks like you," she said. I couldn't speak for a moment. "It's perfect," I finally managed. She leaned against me. "We can fix everything now, right?" she asked. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "Yeah," I said softly. "We can." Later that night, after she fell asleep, I stood by the living room window and watched the porch light glow against the snow. Revenge hadn't come from shouting, or bitterness, or destruction. It came from truth, from standing still while lies unraveled themselves, from choosing dignity over rage, from showing up, calm, steady, honest, when it mattered most, and from choosing her, every single time, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay.